Okay, grade 12, so up to now we've revised all the different components when it gets to writing harmony, and now finally we are at an example where we need to actually write and complete the harmony. And this exact example actually comes from last year's final exam paper. So I thought it's appropriate to actually just do this with you and show you how I would harmonize it. Okay, so first of all, what is very important is that you read the instructions, okay? So the instructions here says that complete the 4-part vocal harmonization below by adding the alto, tenor and bass parts. Now, for those of you who are singing in a choir, you know that there's quite a bit of movement normally, in the various voice parts. Of course, not always, but as a rule of thumb, you don't want to just sit on one note for a couple of bars. Okay, so chances are with a vocal harmonization that your harmonic rhythm is going to be quite fast. Okay, so harmonic rhythm is the pace at which your chords basically change within a particular piece. Okay, so that is the instruction. So that gives us some indication of the style that is required. Then another important thing is to actually look at the marking criteria they give you. Okay, so there are 3 things, and it normally looks the same more or less. Okay, so first of all, it says correctness, the notation, the spacing and the voice leading. Okay, notation, make sure that your stems face in the correct direction. Okay, make sure that your grouping is correct. Your spacing, that refers to the ranges of your voices, and then the voice leading, of course, is the way the voices move together. Then the second criteria is the chord progression, and they're going to give you marks for choice of chords and the correct cadences. Okay, so this is where you need to know all about chord progression and which chords can follow which chords. Okay, so that counts 14 marks, the correctness counts 12 marks, and then the quality counts another 4 marks. And for that it's musicality, the use of non-chordal notes, the awareness of style. So you already know now that it's a vocal piece that we're going to harmonize here. Creativity, for example, the use of the cadential 6/4 chord and passing 6/4 progressions. Okay, so you are going to try and incorporate as much of that as possible to show the examiner that you know how to harmonize a 4-part piece. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first thing that you are going to look at is your phrase structure and your cadences. Okay, so it's one thing to decide, I'm going to say have a regular 4-bar phrase structure, but if you can't find a cadence that's going to fit into the end of the phrase, then you have to reconsider. And of course you also look at the rhythm. If there's a long note, chances are that you at the end of your 4 bars, chances are that you are going to have a cadence there. Okay, but in all likelihood in your final exam you are looking at a 4+4 bar phrase structure. Okay, so in this case it is actually going to work out, and like I said, you can see you've got a long note here at the end of your first 4 bars. So my first phrase is going to be like that, and then my second phrase is going to be like that. Okay, so there I have my musical sentences. Then the next thing that's very important is your key. Guys, please check this. Okay, your initial planning, I almost want to say, is more important than the actual harmonization, because if you go wrong there, you're going to run into trouble in your harmonization. And what's very sad so often, especially if they give you something in a minor key, you start harmonizing in the major, and halfway, after wasting 15 minutes, you realize, oh shoot, I've got the wrong key. Okay, so please rather take some time at the beginning and make sure your planning is 100% right. Okay, so let's first just look at the key. So my key signature tells me it's either D major or B minor. Okay, and just my first bar, it doesn't actually tell me if it's D major or B minor, and you should know by now this is not what you look at when you determine the key. Okay, so you look at the complete piece. The first thing that we look at actually is that, okay, so after the key signature is on which note we end. I end on a D, so that's already quite a strong indication that it might be D major. Okay, so if it was, say, B minor, you would look at raised leading tones. Okay, and I've got my, if it was B minor, I've got an A there, but it's not raised, that's not a problem. And the treatment of the leading tone is in any way correct there. But then what's interesting is, if this was B minor, this A, which is the leading tone, would have had to resolve to the D. To the B, or it would have had to be treated stepwise, so moving 6, 7, 8 or 8, 7, 6. Okay, so that is a big red flag. So I already actually know it's not B minor, but there another red flag. Okay, so I am very sure that this is actually D major, and I trust that you also know this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to write my key. Please guys, remember, you always indicate your key at the beginning of your piece. The next thing that I'm going to look is I'm going to see how much of I'm going to look at my cadences, but I'm also going to look at how many of my different progressions can I actually apply in it. Okay, so the first thing that I notice here is that I have the scale degrees 3, 2, 1, and that tells me I can actually use a passing progression here. Okay, so you need to know which passing progression has got the 3, 2, 1, and it is this one. So it's when you have chord 1 moving to 5, 6, 4, moving to 1, 6. Okay, of course, if the direction was different, it would have been 1, 6 here and root position over here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stick to my tonic chord there, and it's like just really grounding myself in D major over there. And then I'm going to use a chord 4 here, and so of course chord 4 is GBD, and then over here I'm going to have a 2, 6, just because of my voice leading. Okay, and then I'm going to have a 5 here. Okay, so you can see I've got an imperfect cadence over there. Okay, and then while we're at the cadences, I'm going to also just look at my end. Of course, I'm going to have a chord 1 there, and then over here I'm going to have a chord 5. Okay, so I fill in all of this beforehand. I don't just start harmonizing there and just go with the flow. Okay, so I do proper planning beforehand. Okay, so then I think what I'm going to use here, so I'm also going to demonstrate that I know how to use different chords and not just stick to my primary chords. Okay, so I'm going to use a chord 1 over here, and then I'm going to use a chord 3 there, which is of course part of my dominant function, and then I can use chord 4 here. I can use a chord 2 over there, and then what's very nice here, I've got my F sharp moving to the E, and of course that can be an indication of a cadential 6/4, so it's going to actually work out here. So I can use a cadential 6/4 here, so 1, 6, 4. Okay, what's also quite worthwhile at this point is to just write your bass line. Okay, already that's going to show you if you have any parallel fifths or octaves between your bass and your soprano. Just before we do that, just check that all your chord progressions is allowed, so that I know is fine. Moving from a 1 to a 4 is fine, 4 to 2 is fine, 4 to 5 obviously it's fine because it's a cadence, 5 to 1, and just remember what I often see when I mark theory is that you treat this as one part, which is fine, it's a phrase, but then you forget to check your chords between here and your next system, and also the placement of your various voices. Okay, so just check that when you go from this part to that part, that you're not going to have crossing and too big distances between your voices. Okay, so chord 1 to 3 is fine, 3 to 4 is fine, that's my only dominant function chord, which can go to chord 4. Chord 4 to 2 is fine, and the rest is perfectly fine. My cadential 6/4 being on the strong beat. Okay, so let's just quickly fill in the bass line, and I think then I'm going to just break this video clip, and maybe I should break it now, okay, and then I'll fill in the bass line in the next video clip, that this video clip doesn't become too long. And then just one last thing that I actually forgot to mention to you guys is that you have to also analyze your music in terms of your non-chordal notes. Okay, so obviously I've done that already, and that's why I already knew what chords I might actually want to use here. Okay, so if we just quickly look at this, so this being chord 1 means that this is going to be a passing note. Okay, this is a lower auxiliary note, and then over here I have another passing note, and here I have an anticipation. Okay, so that's just that you also take note of your various non-chordal notes, and remember you have to also demonstrate that you can add non-chordal notes in your harmony. Okay, so in the next video clip I will quickly go through harmonizing this, that you can actually see how I do it. Okay, good, see you just now again.